The various freedom organizations in Europe treated this sickness on the part of masses of people as a quack might treat a paralyzed patient, namely by persuading him that he was not really paralyzed and would surely be able to dance a polka if it were not for the bad wolf in 1914, the war industrialists, in 1942, the psychopathic generals. A paralyzed patient might like to hear such a consolation and rejoice in it, but he still won't be able to walk. The decent physician would proceed ruthlessly. He would be very careful not to arouse any false hopes in the patient. He would use every means at his disposal to determine the nature of the paralysis and to decide whether it is curable or not. If fundamentally it is curable, then he will find the means of curing it. The fascist dictator declares that the masses of people are biologically inferior and crave authority, that basically they are slaves by nature. Hence, a totalitarian authoritarian regime is the only possible form of government for such people. It is significant that all dictators who today plunge the world into misery stem from the suppressed masses of people. They are intimately familiar with this sickness on the part of masses of people. What they lack is an insight into natural processes and development and the will to truth and research, so that they are never moved by a desire to want to change these facts. On the other hand, the formal democratic leaders made the mistake of assuming that the masses of people were automatically capable of freedom and thereby precluded every possibility of establishing freedom and self-responsibility in masses of people as long as they were in power. They were engulfed in the catastrophe and will never reappear. Our answer is scientific and rational. It is based on the fact that masses of people are indeed incapable of freedom, but it does not, as racial mysticism does, look upon this incapacity as absolute, innate, and eternal. It regards this incapacity as the result of former social conditions of life and therefore changeable. Two important tasks follow from this: the investigation and elucidation of the forms in which man's incapacity for freedom expresses itself. The investigation of the medical, pedagogic, and social tools necessary to establish the capacity for freedom in a more and more thorough and more extensive way. At this point, the mistakes made by democratic governments will be recalled. Pacts with plague-ridden dictators, the many acts of treachery committed against democratic allies, England, Spain, Russia and Czechoslovakia, etc., the priority given to business interests over principles, Russian oil for Italy during the Ethiopian War, Mexican oil for Germany during the Spanish anti-fascist fight, Swedish steel for Nazi Germany, American steel, American coal, etc. for Japan, English behavior in Burma and India, the religious mystical faith of the socialists and communists, etc. But the gravity of these mistakes diminishes when compared with the mistakes of masses of people, their social apathy, passivity, craving for authority, etc. The ineluctable fact remains: the working masses of men and women, they and they alone, are responsible for everything that takes place, the good things and the bad things. True enough, they suffer most from a war, but it is their apathy, craving for authority, etc., that is most responsible for making wars possible. It follows of necessity from this responsibility that the working masses of men and women, they and they alone, are capable of establishing lasting peace. The quintessence of this accomplishment can be nothing but the elimination and incapacity for freedom, Only the masses of people themselves can accomplish this. To become capable of freedom and of securing peace, masses of people who are incapable of freedom will have to have social power. This is the contradiction and its solution. B. Again, this is point B to this statement. Our institute is faced with a momentous task. We have to prepare ourselves for two basically different possibilities. B. In the event that the outcome of this war will not bring the basic facts to the surface of social consciousness, and that the old illusions continue to exist, it is to be assumed that our present position will not change much. If such is the case, we will not be able to escape the conclusion that the illusionary quote-unquote pills, the formal freedoms, the formal joys, the formal democracies will soon give birth to new dictators and a new war. In such a case, we will continue to be quote-unquote isolated in an opposition to this social misery. Our task will be no less difficult. Within this general framework of illusions, we will have to maintain a subjective and objective honesty. We will have to make every effort to keep our insights to the nature of man unadulterated, and at the same time to deepen them. It will not be easy for the workers in the field of orgone biophysics, structure psychology, and sex economy to elude the influences of illusions and to preserve their knowledge in a pure and crystal clear form for future generations. Their knowledge must be practically applicable if the insight into the psychic mass plague should still have to be asserted after the 6th, 12th, and 20th World War. In this case, we will not pass on to our descendants deeds of heroism, war decorations, heroic remembrances, and frontline experiences, but a modest, unobtrusive, unostentatious knowledge, pregnant with the seed of the future. This task can be accomplished even under the worst social conditions. When the time is ripe to overcome the emotional plague, we do not want that generation to make any unnecessary mistakes, and we do not want it to have to cast about for answers to the arguments of the plague. We want it to be able to fall back on old, though neglected, truths, and to be able to shape its life more honestly and more decently than the generation of the 1940s. At this point, some friend or other may well feel prompted to ask, for Christ's sake, why don't you fight for social power to push through the important truths you have perceived? Isn't it cowardly of you to sit there, politically passive, though you claim to be in possession of vital facts? Damn it, fight for positions as ministers of health, ministers of education, statesmen, etc. We understand this argument. Many of us have set it forth again and again. Oh, God. There were many sleepless nights because of it. The dilemma is this. Without the power to put them into practice, truths are of no use. They remain academic. Power, no matter what kind of power it is, without a foundation in truth, is a dictatorship. More or less, and in one way or another, for it is always based on man's fear of the social responsibility and personal burden that freedom entails. Dictatorial power and truth do not go together. They are mutually exclusive. It is a historical fact that truth has always died when its protagonists have gained social power. Power always means the subjugation of others. However, truthful facts can never be put into practice by subjugation, but only by persuasion. We learn this from the French and Russian revolutions. Not a single one of their truths survived more than a few decades at most. Jesus proclaimed a truth that was stupendous at his time. It died in the Christian world when he was replaced by the popes. Deep insights into human misery of 2,000 years ago gave way to formulas. The simple cow gave way to the gold-draped ornament. The rebellion against suppression of the poor gave way to consolations of happiness beyond the grave. The truths of the great French Revolution died in the French Republic and ended in political power-mongering and the ignorance of a Pétain in the business dealings of a Laval. The truths of Marxian economy died in the Russian Revolution when the word, quote-unquote, society was replaced by the word state, and the idea of an international mankind was replaced by a nationalistic patriotism and the pact with Hitler. They died in Germany, Austria, and Scandinavia, notwithstanding the fact that the heirs of the great European freedom fighters had all the social power in their hands. Almost 100 years after the birth of the truths of 1848, the muck, which goes back thousands of years, still prevails. Power and truth do not go together. This, too, is a bitter, unfortunate truth. It is true that those of us who have political experience could wrestle for power just as any other politician. But we have no time. We have more important things to do. And there is no doubt that the knowledge we hold to be sacred would be lost in the process. To acquire power, millions of people have to be fed illusions. This too is true. Lenin won over millions of Russian peasants, without whom the Russian Revolution would have been impossible, with a slogan which was at variance with the basic collective tendencies of the Russian party. The slogan was, "Take the land of the large landowners. It is to be your individual property." And the peasants followed. They would have not offered their allegiance if they had been told in 1917 that this land would one day be collectivized. The truth of this is attested by the bitter fight for the collectivization of Russian agriculture around 1930. In social life, there are degrees of power and degrees of falsity. The more the masses of people adhere to the truth, the less power mongering there will be. The more imbued with rational illusions the masses of people are, the more widespread and brutal individual power mongering will be. It would be stupid to try to win over masses of people with the assertion that they themselves, and not individual psychopaths, are responsible for social misery. that they themselves and not one of their elected or acclaimed leaders bear the responsibility for their fate, that they alone are responsible for everything that happens in the world. This is completely at variance with what they have always been told and what they have imbibed. It would be stupid to try to acquire power on such truths. On the other hand, it is definitely conceivable that the world catastrophe will reach a stage at which the masses of people will be forced to get an insight into their social attitudes, be forced to change themselves and assume the heavy burden of social responsibility. But in such a case, they themselves will acquire power and will rightfully reject groups who conquer power in the interest of the people. Hence, there is no reason for us to fight for power. We can be assured that the masses of people will need us, will call upon us, and will entrust us with important functions if they should ever get in a position to transform themselves in a rational direction. We will be a part of these masses, not their leaders, not their elected representatives, not their custodians. Then, as was the case in Austria and Germany many years ago, masses of people will throng to our clinics, schools, lectures, and demonstrations of scientific facts to get answers to the basic questions of life. They will not demand or expect us to tell them how to solve their life tasks. But they will throng to us only if we shall have remained honest. Then, when masses of people will have to bear the responsibility for social existence themselves, they will inevitably run against their own weaknesses, against the heritage of a vicious past. In short, they will run against those facts in their structures, thoughts, and feelings that we include under the term incapacity for freedom. And as a social institution, together with thousands of friends, we will expose the mechanism of the incapacity for freedom and all the obstructions to the development of freedom to help masses of people to achieve genuine freedom. For this we need no power. The confidence of men and women of all ages, occupations, every color of skin, and every view of life, in our absolute integrity as physicians, researchers, teachers, social workers, biologists, physicists, writers, technicians, etc., will be far more enduring than any power ever acquired by a politician. This confidence will be that much greater the more our scientific and practical activity reflects reality. This confidence cannot be conquered. It comes about of itself when one adheres to one's work honestly. In no case should we want to adapt our insights to the masses' present way of thinking for the purpose of winning influence. Widespread confidence in our activities can proceed only from the deepening of our general knowledge about the nature of the plague. When we are called upon, it will be a sign that self-administration in social life is indeed taking hold, that the will to quote-unquote profound truth, to fruitful self-criticism, is awakening in the working masses of men and women. Since our organization is the only organization that sees through the irrationality of politics and the old ideologies, it cannot be any other way. Conversely, if we continue to remain in the opposition, it will be a sure sign that society is not ready to see through and eliminate the irrationality in its mechanism. In such a case, however, no power would be of any help to us, and we ourselves would only degenerate into irrationality. Don't let this conscious renunciation of power cause anyone to underestimate our work. We do not play the role of humble, unassuming scientists. Our work is accomplished at the source of life, in line with fundamental natural science. False modesty here would be tantamount to self-destruction. It is true that besides, no prostroidam, orgastic potency sounds small. Character armoring, insignificant compared with blackout. Orgone, academic beside baton and tubrok. It seems this way from a contemporary point of view, but compared with Kepler's laws, what remains of Alexander the Great? What remains of Caesar compared with the laws of mechanics? What of Napoleon's campaigns compared with the discovery of microorganisms or unconscious psychic life? And what will remain of the psychopathic generals compared with cosmic orgone? Renunciation of power does not mean renunciation of rational regulation of human existence. It is the effect that is different. Long-sighted, deep and revolutionary, true and life-securing. It does not matter whether we feel the effects tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It will be up to working masses of men and women to pick the fruits of new knowledge today and not the day after tomorrow. The responsibility they bear for their life and activity is no less than the responsibility the individual shoemaker bears for the shoe, the physician for the patient, the researcher for his statements, the architect for his constructions. We do not strive to be people's benefactors or commiserators. We take people seriously. When they need us, they will call us. Then we shall be there. For my part, I reject the struggle for power with the intent of obtruding my knowledge.